Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to start the annual meeting of the Quanticontog Historical Society. Just so everyone knows, we are recording this because we've had some trouble with the links to get into the meeting. And, you know, for those who may not have been able to get in, we'll obviously post this on our website. So tonight, we're going to hopefully quickly go through the annual meeting and then start with the program. So Tom, if you could just change the slide. Now we've kept everybody on, we'll keep, you know, since there aren't a lot of people here, we'll keep the video and audio video on. If you could just turn your audio off, we'd appreciate it. And we're going to use chat for questions. There'll be a live Q&A session at the end of the program. And then we're going to have to vote on a couple of things in the annual meeting. And we ask that you use your chat buttons to vote. Okay, so again, we're going to go through a couple of things. We're going to approve the minutes from the annual meeting last year. We're going to go over a couple of key reports. We're going to do the election of officers and directors. And then we're going to start the Quanti Breachway pre-1938 program that Rich Wells hosted several years ago. Okay, next. These are the minutes from the meeting in last year, which was August 19, 2020. And Leah, I'm going to have you take this one.
Hi, everyone. If you've had a chance to review these minutes, I'm asking for a motion to accept.
Moved by Nancy. So moved by Nancy Mickey.
Is there?
I will
Nancy-
second it. I will second the motion by Julia Matthews.
Julia Matthews. Okay, all in favor of acceptance of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, then the minutes are accepted. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to go quickly through a president's report. You know, obviously we've been managing again through the pandemic, and we appreciate your understanding and flexibility as we moved this year from in-person to virtual. So we had our first two programs in the Grange, but then because of, you know, things that were happening in the community, and because the safety of our members is of utmost importance to us, we decided to go back to virtual. And hopefully we can, the next time we meet, again, I hope we can do that in the Grange. But despite the pandemic this year, we've had record attendance at our programs. So we really appreciate everybody's support on that. Just going to membership update. We are slightly above last year's numbers, and that's great. We're only 10 shy of my personal goal, and I have to say it's mine alone. It hasn't been bought in by the board, but it's my own personal goal. So anything we can do to increase that by the end of the year would be great. I just want to talk briefly about oral histories. You know, it's very important to our work as a historical society, and we've been accomplishing a lot in that area. But if you're interested in doing an oral history, you know, please reach out to any board member and we'll make that happen. Continued efforts in the Archive Center. You know, Anne has done a significant amount of work this year despite the pandemic restrictions. So we're going to see a little bit of that in the next slide. But Anne's full report is on the link to this meeting that went out in the Constant Contact. And you can see there's just been a significant amount of work done in the Archive Center. Just briefly on the website and the Facebook page, just to remind you that there's plenty of content on the website, and that also includes recordings of all our past programs going back many, many, many years. So if you're interested in a topic, you know, you could go there and retrieve the recording of those programs. On the Facebook side, much to our delight, we have almost as many Facebook followers as we have members, and it's a great community a way to ask questions, get input from others, and just participate in that way if you're so inclined. And I see Julia Matthews here. She's been helping us out on that Facebook page, so we really appreciate that. And Rich Wells has done a ton of work on that. Next page. We're still in a continued partnership with the Quaney Grange. I call it a symbiotic relationship. You know, we have the same interests and mission at heart. But this year, we've added additional signage on the Quaney Grange. I hope you've seen that. You know, I have two pictures here so you can get the context of where the sign is, but it is on the side door that you use on the right side of the Grange. And so it's really increased our visibility into the Grange. The second big item that we accomplished this year is additional display cabinets in the lower level. And there's a picture here on the right. You know, just another way for us to display and show some of the artifacts that we have in our archives. And I want to thank Anne, with the help of Joan Gordon, who created some of these displays in these cabinets. And obviously that will be refreshed from time to time. And when we get everybody back in the Grange, you know, there'll be a great way, and you know, to see some of the things that had happened in the Quanticook area. Okay, just quickly, potential future programs. These are things that we're thinking about now or doing initial investigations on, but hopefully this year we'll have something on Quaney Reflections through postcards. We will be having a special exhibit in the Grange lower level. I'm not going to say anything more about that. We'll obviously communicate that when we're all ready to do that. But that's another you know, relationship with the Grange that we're working together to you know, just expand the information in the Grange. Next spring, we're still looking at maybe a program on the Brown family, and in the summer we're looking at Quaney home tour. If you have any ideas, please send them along. We'd to any of the board members, we'd be happy to investigate that. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Tom now on the financials.
Okay, we're in very good shape. We have a bank balance of over $9,000. The board a few years ago asked that we invest any excess funds, money that we don't think we need for operations in the current year, into an investment company. We picked Vanguard Investments, and the original amounts that we have put in there, $31,000, have grown to almost $36,000. We have invested over $25,000 in the archive center. So that just shows you, between the equipment and purchases of archival materials, and you also saw the new display cases. In terms of income, total income for 2020 was $14,385.68. Expenses were $15,321.29 for a slight loss of $935.61. But we made a donation to Friends of the Quaney Grange of $3,000 to help them finish the lower level renovations. And we encourage you to visit the lower level of the Grange to see the work that has been done. So without further ado, those are the highlights. There are more detailed balance sheet and income statement on the website that are available if you care to review them. So with that, I just need a vote to accept the treasurer's report.
This is Nancy Mogilnicki. I move that we accept the report by the treasurer.
This is Emily Thompson. I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Okay, Donna
Yes.
Jordan's going to take us through the election of the officers and the board.
There are 2 officers up for reelection for a 2-year term. President Joan Lauer and Treasurer Tom Doyle. There are 7 directors up for reelection for a 1-year term. Ken Andrew, Ann Doyle, Donna Jordan, Paul Matthews, Richie Thompson, Rich Wells, and Steve Young. Is there a motion to approve the slate of officers and directors?
So moved by Nancy Mogilnicki.
And second by Emily Thompson.
There a vote?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passed.
We wish to thank 2 members who have, one member will resign at the end of this meeting, Peter Molinicki, and Sandy Champlin resigned earlier this year. So we want to thank them for their contributions. But because of that, we now have 2 vacancies on our board. So if anyone is interested, please let me know or one of the other board members. And before we go into the program, I would like to make a presentation. The board members wish to thank our President Joan for a very successful year. She is really a superstar for our organization. We will present her with a customized tide clock of the Quaney area. And I will give it to you soon, Joan.
Wow, thank you, Donna and the board.
And,
I didn't realize this was happening, obviously, so I really appreciate it. It's been a
well,
tough year because of the pandemic, but I think we're just doing, all things considered, just fabulous.
yes. Thanks to you, Joan.
Thank you,
Thank
Donna.
you.
Okay, so we're going to start the Breachway program, and that will be followed. Oh, wait, we have to close the meeting. I'm sorry. First, let's close the meeting. Did I hear a motion to close the meeting?
So moved by Nancy Mogilnicki.
Seconded by Julia Matthews.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll close the meeting, the annual meeting for 2021. Okay, so we're going to start the program in 1 second. And as I said, it's going to be followed by a live Q&A. So if you think of questions during the program, please feel free to add them to the chat. Use the chat buttons at the bottom, and we'll go through those questions at the end.
First of all, I'd like to thank Ann Doyle for helping me out. I've been spending quite a bit of time.
Can't hear a thing.
And it's really nice that there's so many generous people that donate things to Historical Society.
We can hear it now.
And people that categorize them and make them in ways that people can actually see them and use them. I also am thankful to my wife's family. They happened to be down here in the early 1900s and took a number of photos of the Breachway area. And so, although Tamar's father likes taking pictures of the ocean, there's a lot of great
Oh,
pictures.
there. Okay. I didn't know. I thought I was supposed to push it.
In preparation for this presentation, I was also, on those winter nights, I was able to go on the internet and look at some resource materials that I didn't know were available, and I'm going to share some of those with you this evening. Looking through all these things, I was very struck by the fact that Quaney has really changed a lot over time. As a matter of fact, that if our grandparents came down, they may not recognize it the way it is right now. And I was thinking, may our grandchildren, when they come down, may not recognize the Quaney the way it was that we recognize. I know we lived down in Ashaway Colony. I came down many years ago, 44 years ago. I wasn't married then, and I came down to my wife's family's cottage on Ashaway Colony. And reflecting back on that, I was surprised to look out the window and see every single house on our street has either been redone, remodeled, or added onto. And then I looked again and I said, of all the people on that street, the only people that are the same people are the people that are the nuns that are used the nuns' place, and they change every year. So in 45 years, remarkable how much change has happened in our neck of the woods. And then I thought, what would Tamar's grandfather think if he came back and looked at the Breachway today? All the changes that have occurred there, some by nature and some by humans. Her grandfather came down by train. Tamar's brother is really into trains in a big way. And so we posed this question, Woody, how would Grandpa Beach have gotten down to Quaney? And he had the train schedule. He would take an electric train to from Bristol, Connecticut to Hartford, a train to New Haven, and then a train to Westerly, and then horse and buggy to Quaney. Hello. Technology works really well when the Bluetooth is connected. I will do it the old-fashioned way. Her brother also mentioned this fact, which I thought was kind of interesting. That train ride from New Haven to Westerly was kind of a new thing. The bridge that went over the Thames River was not completed till 1889, the train bridge that went over the Thames. And the Saybrook Bridge that spanned the Connecticut River was not done till 1870. So it gives you an idea of a lot of the traffic that occurred in this area was not by land, but it was by water. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes.
Hit the arrow so you can walk around.
Oh, could you do that? Okay. Could you hit the arrow, please? No. So nature has had its toll on what the Breachway looks like and what we look like. The 1938 hurricane caused this kind of destruction. And the 54 hurricane and Hurricane Sandy probably did their share also, and really changed the shape of what the whole Breachway looked like. This kind of thought in my mind, if this is what happened in recent memory, what were the historic hurricanes and what destruction might they have caused to the Breachway, to the whole Quaney Pond and whatnot. I found this study by Jeffrey Donnelly at Brown University. He was interested in measuring how high the swell was after during each hurricane. He did so by taking core samples in the earth, and he did so in the Succotash Swamp, and that's just west of Point Judith in Jerusalem, probably just south of the Matunic Oyster House, if you've been there. So he dug core samples out, and he identified these 5 Category 3 storms that were equal in intensity to the 1935 hurricane. One of them was the Great Colonial Hurricane of 1635, or 16, should have been 1635. There was the Great Connecticut Hurricane of 1638, and then, actually they didn't call them hurricanes back then, they called them gales, because they hadn't invented hurricanes yet. And so you had the gale of 1815, and then we had the 1938 hurricane. If you could switch the slide. This is an interesting chart because it shows how high the tidal surge was from each one of these storms. So here's 1938, right there. Look at the storms, and you can hit the button again. In 1935 and 38, these were over 2 feet higher than the tidal surge in 1938. So imagine the kind of destruction that would have been on the pond. Of course, there weren't all the buildings there, but certainly the Native American population must have been impacted by those 2 storms. The next great thing that we did to change the Breachway was the construction of the new Breachway in 1961. If you could hit it again. Here's a film from the Beach collection of films showing that construction. I'm always impressed by how old the machinery looks, and this was during my lifetime. This did a lot of interesting things to the pond. It allowed more flow to come in and out of the pond, and it actually improved the quality of the Quaney Pond. And as a matter of fact, I think the Quaney Pond may be one of the most, the best health-wise of the salt ponds along the Rhode Island coast. It also allowed for traffic to be able to go in and out from the pond to the ocean without so much problem. There's a great oral history by Walter Nugent where he talks about coming down as a boy. His cottage was way out at the end, well, I'll show it on the map when we get to it, of where the old Breachway was. And what his job was as a boy was to go out in a boat and in the wintertime try to find out where the Breachway had moved over the winter. So that gives you an idea of how shallow that Breachway and how movable it was during that time. And this certainly has changed the Breachway quite a bit. Here's a picture of that Breachway. Walter Nugent lived way out here. And this shows it's the old and new Breachway. This is kind of the plan that was used to sell the new Breachway. And instead of the Breachway coming in and running west, it almost paralleled the coastline for a distance before going into the pond. It went straight in after it made that little dog leg in the beginning. A couple of other interesting things. This little place right here is the land that the King's Cottage used to be on, and we'll show a picture of that. It used to be one of the places people stayed when they came down before the 38 hurricane. And of course, this gives all the names of people that lived along the street and how the land was broken up. So we can't talk about nature's impact unless we talk about the Ice Age, because the Ice Age really helped form the salt ponds, and it marked the beginning of humans in the area. If you hit the slide. At the height of the Ice Age, the ice went out past Block Island. Right here, we'd be sitting under a huge block of ice. It wouldn't be very pleasant. Ocean level was 400 feet lower than it is today. It'd be nice with global warming if we could get back to some of that trend. And in order to go out to the beach, you'd have to go out to the continental shelf here, which had been quite a ride from Quaney to get to the shore. Next slide. As that receded, as the ice receded, it left debris. One important area of debris was what we call the Charleston Moraine. It was a terminal moraine. It was the end of the ice age. As it retreated, it left a pile. That's if you went north from Route 1, and biked up that hill, you'd have to download your bike into a lower gear in order to get up the Charleston Moraine. What happened south of that was there was a huge tidal or shore plain that was worked and reworked by with storms, tides, and currents, and it formed the salt pond that's Quaney along the shore as well as the other ponds. Next slide. So about this number kind of blows my mind. About 12,000 to 10,000 years ago, the first humans arrived here. We have archaeological evidence of them actually having camps where they lived that are in areas now that are underwater. So it gives you an idea of how early they were here. It'd be fascinating to find more information about this time in history. I've read a few things online and a few books, but it'd be nice to have somebody knowledgeable come give a talk on this important history. But I know in the Quanakantog area, there have been evidence of a lot of Indian artifacts found by people. And when they've dug foundations for houses, they often come across mittens, what they call, or what Indian, how do we put this? Indian outhouses. And they're very distinct because they have shells on them, so you can see them. And so we know they were out on the Quaney Pond, the Quaney area. We also, Alan Hazard just gave a presentation this summer where he talked about wampum and its cultural significance to the Indians, and talked about his ancestors living in this area and how they fished and got shellfish in the area, and stayed here for at least 9 months of the year, only retreating farther inland during the harsher winter months. There's a couple of other good books, and I've got to read my notes here in order to get to this. Oops. There's a couple of really good books. There's one by a William Cronin called Changes in the Land, Indians, Colonists, and the Ecology of New England. And he talks about how much the land had been changed before Europeans arrived here, and talks about the evolution of that change. Indians would burn off underbrush. They would farm. Native American farming was different than the colonists in that they would plant an area, and when it went fallow, they would go into a new area and plant. Colonists were very much interested in their own private land, and so they kept on working the same plot of land, and the only way they could keep growing crops on it was to add some nutrients, and so they used seaweed. But it was that idea of keeping things in a very property-oriented fashion. Colonists also brought with them livestock, which Native Americans didn't do, and that required the use of fodder for the winter, so that seagrass was really important, and that's why these areas around here are so important. So there's some interesting differences. But this is by a couple of folks from the anthropology department at UMass, and they talk about the different stages of Native Americans here. That gives you a little idea of what they were doing at different times. Again, I'd like to study this area more. It really is a fascinating part of history. So then we had Europeans arriving. This is a map that was done by Adrian Bloch in 1614, after his second voyage to our area. He was one of the first European explorers that actually went up into the Narragansett Bay, and was established trade routes with Native Americans all along the southern coast of Rhode Island and Connecticut. And he has a distinction of identifying Long Island as an island. And probably more important, he has this little island off the coast named after him. What's interesting on this, and you can't see it, I wish I could have gotten a higher resolution from the Library of Congress where I found this, but right here, where we are, it says Wampanoag. It identifies the Native American tribe, which was probably referred to Wampanoag. So by 1814, they were already trading, because these maps were made after the fact, in this area that the Dutch were. The other thing is interesting to notice, it's New Netherland, and notice what they claim as being New Netherland. If it wasn't for a few battles lost, we might be called New Netherland rather than New England. Next slide. Here's another Dutch early map of the area. This is also interesting because look at the yellow. That's the area the Dutch were in control of. And the green part, which was what the English were. So notice it's changed a little bit, but even in this, at this date, 1639, they still were claiming most of Rhode Island. The Dutch had a strong relationship to this area because they were barterers. The English liked to deal with cash, so transactions were done with money. And the Dutch were very comfortable with dealing with product back and forth. So, you know, you have a cow, I've got a bale of hay, I'll give you 60 bales of hay for a cow. And they were comfortable with that, where the English wanted to use money. And that was really important to the colonists that were English during the English Civil War, because the Dutch were able to keep them supplied with materials in exchange for other materials. The Rhode Islanders were not as, they were liberal, I guess. They were Quakers versus in the Massachusetts Bay colony, they were more Puritan and more authoritarian in their rule. And so the Rhode Islanders were much more comfortable dealing with the Dutch, which were much more liberal-minded than with dealing with the people from the Massachusetts Bay Company. So here's another map. This is kind of important because this is, notice the change in color. I think that river there is the Thames in Connecticut. I think that is. The Wampanoag is still the Indian tribe that's, or Native American tribe that's here. And this is what's in 1690, a few years after we have the Stantons arriving in the area. There were several things that occurred when the English started settling the area. They purchased a large tract of land from the native population, which encompassed most of Westerly. It was called the Musquamacut Purchase, and it was done by 30 families from Newport. And if I'm really good, I'll give you the date on that. That was in 1660. In 1659, another Stanton was given all of the area we're on right now, and it was part of a thank you from the Sachem of Ninigret, because it was the Stanton was able to speak the native languages, and he was able to negotiate for the release of a princess from another tribe. And so in return for that, the tribe gave him the Quaney Neck. And the Stantons have been on this neck for all through the 17th century and had farms on the neck. Whistling Chimneys, we talk about this is one of those farms. This is kind of interesting because it was credited as maybe being a trading post. The Stantons set up a trading post, or they had the rights to set up a trading post on the Pawcatuck River. They also think they had some trading going on the Quaney Pond, but there's no hard evidence to say, yes, definitely there was. There is some early Dutch tiles that are in Whistling Chimneys that show that that time it could have been some sort of trade. They could have gotten that way. And we also know, you'll learn a little bit later, that the Breachway may have been of service to having that be considered a trading post. There are along the side here, Ann has put together some great display boards, and there's some of that, where's the one here? The Stanton Babcock, way over in the corner there, of this particular house and something about it, the history of it, with additional pictures, which are kind of interesting. Next slide. This is another farm. This farm is still in existence. As you travel down West Beach Road, it's on the left. Just before the road takes a turn to go out towards the Breachway. This is kind of an interesting farm because I believe this was owned by a man that when he passed away, in his will, he gave, it was credited in his estate that he had 40 horses and as many slaves, which is kind of the dark side of the Quaney Neck, and that each one of these farms, these two, plus the Seabreeze Inn, which was also a farm, all had slaves. In fact, on the Seabreeze Inn, if you look on that display board, it shows the design for the slave quarters at the farm. So these were the three farms that were on the neck and were passed. Their land was divided and passed down from generations and has been in members of the family. The Sheffield House, for example, which is Stanton Sheffield House, which is the one we had just seen, was given to a son-in-law of a Stanton. All right, this is Thomas Jeffers. This is the first English map of the area. What's interesting about this is the first one I could see a mention, I believe, of Quanakantog. Of course, they spell it funny. And it also shows a little breachway. So it almost seems like that there was a breachway. People knew that there was a breachway at this time. But that was in 1755. So what did it look like down here? Well, I posed this question to a good friend, Peter Mogilnicki, and he mentioned, wow, have you seen some of the artwork of Martin Johnson Heady? And so I went online and looked, and I found these. There's two pictures. There's this one. What did the salt marshes look like at that time? And so this gives an idea. Now, he was a little later, about 1850 he did these paintings, but it gives an idea of what it looked like. We didn't have all those photographs that we can use back in that time. It gives you a little idea of what the area might have looked like. So I was sitting watching television one night, and I have to multitask when I watch television, and I was wondering, there's this big mystery about there being a third breachway, direction for a breachway. We know the one that was changed in '61, but there was one before that, and I've listened to some of the oral histories, and maybe it's my comprehension of listening, but I was never able to figure out where those breachways went. And I was thinking, well, can I go to town records? What can I do to find out where that breachway went? And I was for some reason, on the Library of Congress website, and I saw a section called Ancient Maps. And I went and found this nautical chart from 1848. Now, the nautical chart's a huge area of Rhode Island, and I blew up just a section around Quaney. But look, and it shows the old breachway. And look where it goes. Here's Whistling Chimneys right here. And that breachway goes almost right to Whistling Chimneys, doesn't it? Next slide. So there's Whistling Chimneys. We can switch past that. So here's the nautical chart of 1878, and I believe I picked that one because, oh yes, this was the time that Thomas Edison in Quaney decided it would be a great way to produce iron ore by using magnets and extracting iron out of the sand. And so he had an operation going. I was told that it was near the Stanton Sheffield House, his plant was, and it was off in the East Beach, the Central Beach areas where he had set up his plant, but I'm not sure on that. But I was surprised to hear it was 1,000 tons of iron ore was sent out of Quanticontog before he shut the operation down because there were cheaper ways of making iron. But I thought it was interesting that someone like Thomas Edison would have been coming to Quanti. And the next slide. So this slide is really, it's a little fuzzy, but I want you to take a very close look at the Breachway and then look at the next slide. So in 1886 to 1887, something dramatic happened to that Breachway. So again, using the miracle of technology, I went online and looked at weather forecasts, and the blizzard of 1886, or 1886, dumped an incredible amount of snow on New England, had extremely high winds, extremely low temperatures, and caused tremendous erosion along the coastline. So it may be, I don't know for a fact, but it seems like it might be logical that that's what did that to the Breachway. It's either that or that the need for that Breachway wasn't important anymore because they had now other ways of transporting goods besides using the water and the coastline. And it maybe they just didn't dig the Breachway. The old Breachway looks like it had to be dug because of the angle it was at. It seems like someone had to maintain it. And there is some talk about, when they talk about this older Breachway, of having to go out and do some digging. In some of the oral histories, they talk about, talking about grandfathers saying that they had to go out and maintain the Breachway. So that might make some sense. The next one. Now this is kind of an interesting one because there's roads now going out to the Breachway, actually down to the Breachway. And this was actually the time that there were cottages built along the shore. In fact, in, 1888, there were 14 cottages built along the Breachway. In 1893, there were several more cottages added, including a shore dining hall that offered overnight accommodations. So that's, this is the map that kind of shows the roadways that you needed to get down there. Hope Andrews has a great DVD on West Beach where she talks a little bit about this history that was available with the Historical Society, and maybe if there was interest, we could make a few more copies, but that shows the development of the Breachway. So what did it look like back then as the Breachway was being built? I love this picture. It's an old picture taken from Whistling Chimneys towards the Breachway. So we're actually looking towards the Breachway. This may be one of the bowling alleys. But what's interesting is seeing the stone walls, harken back to 2 programs ago when we had a program on stone walls, and you see cattle grazing in fields. And again, this was a source of great, the salt grass was very useful for feeding cattle and grazing. And it almost looks like there's more land there than there is now. It looks like some of that has been filled in by water. And what is amazing is the vegetation, how low the vegetation is versus what it is now. A whole different perspective. I love that picture. So this is an important picture because of the life-saving station. Shipping was really the mode of transportation along the coastline. And there were a tremendous number of shipwrecks along the coast. There was actually a great program by Dwight Brown, which is available in the oral histories, that talks about the shipwrecks and the names of them. Unfortunately, it was a recording of a presentation he made, and I'd love to see the pictures he also was showing. But it's just hearing all the shipwrecks and how the life-saving station was important in saving lives along the coastline. Here's a picture of the mouth of the Breachway, the early mouth of the Breachway, just about the time that Coast Guard station was being put in. you notice that would be very easy to walk across that breachway compared to what it is now. So the breachway was developed and had several guest houses or hotels along the beach. The Eldridge House, the Ocean View, the Worcester House, the Breakers, the St. George. Around the corner was the King's Cottage. And so what's remarkable about this is the density of people that were on the breachway at this time. So let's take a little bit closer look at some of these places. Next one. Here's the King's Cottage. This is the one that's right in the middle of the current breachway we have. Notice the stone wall along here that was used to hold back the water. Clearly, this was one of the first places to go in the 38 hurricane, given the low-lying position. It was almost had a bullseye on it, but that was the King's Cottage. And then we have the Eldridge House. Here's an early picture of the Eldridge House. Again, look at all those people that are there. Here's a later picture of the Eldridge House. Notice they had put porches on the front of the cottage. This is a view from across the breachway at the Eldridge. And in back of the Eldridge House, they put in a bowling alley and also, I believe, a garage. So the Eldridges were very well-connected family. There's a great oral history by one of the Eldridge, or ancestors of the Eldridge, in the Historical Society. And you may have a lot of people coming down to the Historical Society after this presentation. But it talks about the Eldridge. They were avid Democrats, and they would hold the Democratic picnic once a year at the Eldridge House. And so it was a big event. A lot of people came down to Quanticontog for that. So this was, there's a kind of the story that he supported some, I can't think of the governor's name, some governor, and that governor then gave him the postmastership of Ashaway. Bradford. My grandfather. Oh, great. And it's a great story. It's a great story. Was that?
And my grandfather used to do, they had all kinds of people come down from New York, right? And they're all on that porch. And it was always a problem he had because they would go in the water. Because there were so many people on the hidden porch.
Oh.
It didn't collapse.
Now, have you done an oral history?
No. I'm the third generation of this. I just learned it since I moved back to Connecticut, from Connecticut, and learned all about it through Ann and everybody. And so
Okay.
I'm picking up lots of information.
So this is, I'm a little plug for oral history if you haven't done one. Every oral history, although they're the same topic, hits something else. Now, I've listened to a number of them. So you listen to one, and then you listen to someone else who lived next door, and it's like a whole different place because they have a whole different perspective because they've heard stories from other people. So...
Did they talk about the plant-based states?
Yes.
Okay. And they had the guy from, what was it, Britain, New Britain, in England, rather, come in down, and they had a big plant-based.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
I think I may have pictures if I can find them.
Ann? This lady right here.
She knows where I am.
Okay.
That just popped into my head a few minutes.
Now, everybody's heard her say that, right?
Every time I come, I learn something new.
Great. That's wonderful. The other place, which I didn't find out a lot about, was the Breakers. The Breakers was owned by a farmer, Clark, who also ran this. The one thing I heard reoccurring in the oral histories was that this was a place you went that was dry. They didn't have alcohol. They didn't serve alcohol. Now, whether that meant that at the Eldridge House you could get alcohol during Prohibition, I don't know. I didn't find out.
Rich, look at the difference in the number of people on the porch.
Good point, Rich. Okay, this is the St. George. Again, I didn't find much out about the St. George. And so if somebody has a story about the St. George, that would be great. I know that the boardwalk ended just past the St. George. Next slide. So here's a picture from the Breachway of the Breakers, the Worcester, boy, this is really, I'm doing this from memory. This gets really hard. The Ocean House. Oh, and the Elbridge. Thank you. I did that. So, and there's one more. Can someone tell me what the other one is in the picture? King's Cottage. Yes, the King's Cottage, way there on the lower on the ground. Here's a picture of the Breachway. I love this picture because you can see how shallow the water was. I also love this picture. This was a time in history where they hadn't discovered the bikini, the one piece, or bathing trunks. It seems like if you went swimming, you had to be properly attired. And this picture is kind of interesting because this is the entrance to that boardwalk, which we'll see in the next slide in just a few minutes, that comes from the east side. So this is coming around the point of the Breachway. And so that's the beginning of the boardwalk. And the next page are pictures from the boardwalk. This is taken from the boardwalk looking back into the pond. There's King's Cottage. Here's a picture taken from that boardwalk now looking out to sea. Love that ship. And this is a really interesting picture. This is the boardwalk, and notice how close it comes to the porch. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't imagine that happening in this day and age. When I heard from a lot of the oral histories talking about this time, they would use the word, this is a time of togetherness, where there was a feeling of togetherness across the Breachway, or a sense of community. People would go strolling on the boardwalk at night and stop in at people's houses, talk to them as they're rocking in their rocking chairs on the boardwalk. And once that boardwalk was gone, all of a sudden there became walls on every property, and people didn't go across, and so they lost that sense of community. It was more about private property, which was kind of interesting. It's a total different feel and change in community. Because there were so many people that lived along the Breachway, they could support different businesses. Here's Mother Brindley's, and I think you've had programs on that before, I believe. But that was a kind of the convenience store in Quaney, and Mother Brindley, I guess, was quite the character. And then there was Wilson's Ice Cream Parlor.
No relation.
No relation to Bill, but we have ice cream tonight anyways. And there also was a bowling alley at the Wilson's Ice Cream Parlor. Here's a picture of the lifeguard station, and what people did as an amusement or as an entertainment is they go for a tour at the lifeguard station. So they, if you hit it again, they'd go by King's Cottage. They would get in a boat. They'd paddle across. These are liberal women. And they'd go out for a walk at some time at the Coast Guard station. Great, next. Now, does anyone have any stories about this? So, supposedly, there was a high dive at Quanticontog. I kind of like this picture. I like this young lady who's sitting down here looking up at the gentleman, and I have to wonder what she's thinking. It's either, they didn't have insurance back then. So it's either, you know, wow, look at that brave man, or that stupid dummy. So, and they had bowling alleys. This is the bowling alley in two iterations. This is the the Eldridge, 'cause- and then this is also it, and a renovation.
Upstairs, the people that worked there slept, and they had half, I can remember the half walls, and then the front has a store. And stuff goes one on abandoned.
Oral history of someone who lived up there,
Del Harmon.
Del Harmon.
She's here tonight.
Del, where's Del?
Have her raise her hand.
There's Del, yes. That's great oral history, so it'll be great that you should listen to that. Talks about life up on the top of the bowling alley. So this is what life was like at the bowling alley. Click it again. I love the garb that people wore. Yes. These are all relatives of my wife, Tamar. It's Uncle Harry. This has to be in the 20s, would you say, Tamar? Yeah, I love the pants. Don't you wish those came back?
This was all in the 50s. As a kid, I used to go down and bowl there.
This was on the same film as a Boardwalk, so. And some of the same characters. There's a picture here of someone changing the pins and letting their feet hang down. How many people here have changed pins at the bowling alley? Yeah.
Plus an extra nickel to have somebody do the pins for it.
Was that destroyed in the 30 hurricane?
No.
Again, what year was that?
There to the 60s.
And smoking was still healthy back then.
Put up a tennis court.
So when did it come down?
In the 60s.
I was gonna say, because I remember buying penny candy there, and I was born in '61.
In the 60s, okay.
That's the side of where the tennis court is.
Right, with a tennis court, right, I was on right there.
So right where the tennis courts are now are where the bowling alley was. All right, next slide. So there are other forms of entertainment. I don't know where this cottage is. If you know, please let us know. Gives an idea of what it must have been like walking down there. And then there's these really impressive feats of strength. Look at this guy, one-handed. I don't think he had children, did he? And then this is my favorite. Now this is an adult activity that you do at the beach. So I guess the question is now, what will the nature and humans do to shape the Breachway of the future? And then I have this mystery film. Does anybody know who this is? The person that owned this canoe. So Tamar's brother's in the hat, and I think Tamar's there too.
Yeah. I didn't wear a top. The story is he would come down from Maine in this canoe for several years. I
So that's all I have. And I hope the ice cream hasn't melted.
Rich, it was great seeing that again. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of work went into that, and it was really great seeing it again. So as I said before, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. And, we're going to open this up to any board member who may know the answer, or anybody on the call if you know. But I'm going to start with a couple of questions. Were the hotels at the Breachway just open from Memorial Day to Labor Day?
No, because the 38 hurricane happened after Labor Day.
Oh, that's right. The 38 hurricane happened after Labor Day, didn't it?
Yes. Were people in the hotels then?
Well, they were in,
I know they were destroyed. Probably would have been a lot more deaths if that were true.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
I
Maybe.
suspect just from things that I've seen that it was a window in the summer where they were open. But if Anna's still on, if she has anything to say, I don't know if I
I
see her.
can't.
Okay, I have another one. Someone says that they remember the pre-1960 pond smelling bad due to insufficient water exchange. Does anyone know if that changed between the old and the new breachways? The amount of water exchange?
Well, I did a little research on that. There actually was significant amount of change in the water flow. Um, I guess the issue was in what areas of the pond. The Salt Ponds Coalition has a lot of information about how it has impacted the Quanticontog Pond specifically, and that I think ours is the healthiest pond in the area because it has a better flow of water going in and out.
It certainly looks like there's a drastic amount of difference, right?
And it
So
was
Ann, I see you on. Were the hotels open between Memorial Day and Labor Day only?
Well, if they were, it wasn't very, it was soon after Labor Day that people would go home. I would guess. Yeah. But I don't know for sure when they opened, exactly. I'm not sure about that, but I think that we can assume that it's in that window
Yeah.
of time.
So someone asked if the heyday of the Breachway hotels and boardwalk from 1889 to 1938, when everything were washed away in the hurricane, or did the heyday end sooner than 38? When we talk about the heyday down there, was it really the 38 hurricane that washed away that?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, as long as it existed, that was a place where people gathered all the time. So I would say it lasted until the 38 hurricane.
some of those films that you saw were from the 20s, so that would make some sense and back up what Ann was saying.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions?
Yes, Joan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't get over the hotels and boardwalks going along the Breachway and not the ocean. Today, everything's along the ocean. I wonder why they were so intrigued by that Breachway to build the hotels and the boardwalk there rather than go around the corner and face the ocean. Does anybody have any idea why that's so? Why that was so?
That's a good question. I know there are some hotels that went around, but you're right. It wasn't, what these big hotels that you see, which it never ceases to amaze me when I see the size of some of those hotels on the Breachway.
Yes.
Uh,
What
I
was
think-
the view that what intrigued them to look west instead of out south to the ocean and Block Island? Much better view as far as I'm concerned.
I think it was the protection that that little breachway seemed to give them. You know, it wasn't as exposed.
And it might have been access to the ocean so that it's a lot easier to launch from the breachway than it would be from doing it from the shoreline out front here.
Hmm.
And it may be that commerce, it may be that there was enough, the areas that people knew were the breachway.
This is Ken Andrew. I could speak about Block Island. And during the 1800s, the late 1800s, and up until the 38 hurricane and after, air conditioning was non-existent. So many of the city people that were in cities where it would just be much hotter would flow to Block Island, and probably the hotels here in Quaney. Then I think it was like in the 50s, people were getting more mobile, but they were mobile on their own automobiles. People could afford, in the 40s and the 50s, could afford their own automobiles. And I know with Block Island, come the 50s and the 60s, people just, it became very desolate out there. It wasn't until like maybe the 70s, Sheila and I worked out on Block Island, and we worked in 1975. And that was when things in the early 70s, things started picking up again, and it became more fashionable, I think, to go to the beach. And so there was a lot more travel. And so from the early 70s, maybe the late 60s, people wanted to flock to the beach again. My guess is here in Quaney, things were like that too. But just my little comments.
So I know, Rich, that you joked about that man diving off that platform, which had to be like 10 or 12 feet, I would think. But and then you see the women waiting in the breachway. So it was pretty low. Do we know how much it varied? Or was that man in trouble after he hit the water?
No, it varied to quite an extent. I remember.
Would it have been by the Coast Guard station that might have been the deepest, Dan?
Yeah, I would say the first, yes, it was definitely not the beginning of the breachway. There's only one person that I've talked to that has actually said that they've seen that person diving or somebody diving. And that was Kuhn. Her last name is Kuhn. Does somebody know the first name? What was it?
Barbara, was it?
Barbara Hutchins Kuhn, yes. She's the only person that has mentioned that. So I don't think it was something that happened a lot.
It was amazing. Well, I'm glad he survived that.
But you know, you needed, you know, you could walk across at low tide, and that's why they were having problems with the smells of everything that used to, you know, the seaweed and all that stuff, that because that it was really very low at low tide, and so they needed to increase the water passage.
But even the old breachway, you got boats through it, right?
But I think it was difficult.
Okay.
See, I do think it was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Even launching the boats from the Coast Guards or life-saving, they call it the life-saving station.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
That was right at
around,
the mouth, yeah.
they, you know, it presented a problem. And that's why I
Mhm.
think that they ended up wanting to change that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, any other questions? I know we're running late. But anyway, Rich, thanks. I really enjoyed that a second time, just as much as I enjoyed it the first time. And I know that took a lot of work.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks.
Okay, so I want to just close by saying thank you, for your participation. And we look forward to seeing you again with another exciting program about the area.